right. Good afternoon, Housing Authority Board of Directors, and over to you, Director Harrington.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Housing Authority Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, June 27th, 2023. Clerk Moss, could you please do us the honors?
Yes, thank you, Chair Harrington. The Washington County Board of Commissioners is now meeting as the Housing Authority Board of Directors for Washington County at this special meeting, June 27th, 2023. Director Fye?
Present.
Director Treese?
Here.
Director Willie?
Here.
Director Roper?
Here.
Director Sabara?
Here.
Director Rogers?
Here.
Director Harrington?
Here. Thank you. We have a full complement of all 7 Board of Directors members. The first item on the next item on our agenda is public comment. Clerk Moss, do we have anyone who wishes to address us today?
So, Madam Chair, I did not see anyone in the room sign up. Would any members in the auditorium wish to provide comment to the Housing Authority for up to 2 minutes on any housing-related topic? Seeing one, would any member online wish to provide comments for up to 2 minutes on housing-related topics? Give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands. Director Harrington.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. And with that, we will move to our action items for today. And the first is to authorize our interim executive director to negotiate and execute a purchase and sale agreement, also known as a PSA, to begin due diligence for a property at 15751 Northwest Brugger Road. Please, take it away.
Directors, again, Interim Director Michael Bonacore, thank you all for the time today. I'm going to simply greet you and turn it over to Andrew for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Harrington and Board of Directors. For the record, my name is Andrew Crampton. I'm Development Manager with the Housing Authority of Washington County. You have before you a presentation to discuss a potential opportunity for the Housing Authority to acquire a piece of property and set the framework for a development opportunity in the North Bethany area. Just quickly to go through the agenda is we'll review the context for the authority pursuing the acquisition, review the site and the area context as well, discuss due diligence steps and the review timeline, and then take questions and feedback prior to a board vote. So just as initial context, as we continue to support development, affordable housing development in Washington County, we're really seeing our Housing Authority agency begin to be a lead developer in the county. We saw that with the Heartwood Commons redevelopment, the soon acquisition of Woodspring Apartments, and an additional ground-up new construction. And there's really a couple reasons for that as we really position ourselves. The first is really being able to leverage our move to work, MTW agency status, and really being able to be the entity most equipped to bring in federal funds and resources into development. And that really will allow us to pursue federal grant funding and structure our voucher opportunities in ways that otherwise they wouldn't be available in the community. So it's really a unique pivot and opportunity, both as we grow as an agency, but as we've gained additional authority through our MTW status. And then really being able to think of the link between public health and housing as well. That's really the opportunity we have both as a housing authority but also a county entity, is we have great partnerships with Health and Human Services, Department of Housing Services, Supportive Housing, to really be that link both as an authority but also a county entity. So this opportunity is really to continue that. And in preparation for that, knowing that there's a changing landscape with affordable housing, funding opportunities at the state, as well as continued local support, the Housing Authority has been working with commercial brokers to survey both listed and off-market properties. We had a list of about 15 to 20 that were potentially viable properties to pursue. Really, the goals and the parameters was to pursue properties that were between $3 and $5 million purchase price. And that is really industry standard, but also looking at our available local development fund. We wanted to use that fund to leverage development. That's really the intent, is That fund was created through development partnerships previously, and the intent is for that to be regenerative for future development, but also to have a protection for our existing programs and not have too big of a bite on one apple where we take a large acquisition and don't have the resources to protect the authority. So really looking at $3 to $5 million purchase price, and somewhat correlated with that is looking at between 2 to 4 acres approximately with land. That's both because of purchase price, but also because that's really kind of the sweet spot for flexibility as we pursue a development. It's really in the range of what you see for development sites to be able to have a variety of potential funding sources, which I'll get to in a moment. And then looking at land that's zoned for multifamily, so we don't have to go through any sort of zone change or process for land that's not available for development, and looking at really 75 to 120 unit zoning capacity. Again, trying to really hit that sweet spot for maximum flexibility as we pursue funding sources. And then looking for sites that are flat, have limited environmental constraints, limited acquisition constraints. We have a lot of advantages as a public agency, but trying to negotiate with 2, 3, 4 property owners and aggregate, we're not really the best development entity equipped for that. So really trying to look for one piece of property that's in that range, that has a willing seller that's able to execute right away was the goal with this exercise. After that exercise, we really targeted the site in North Bethany. It met all of those parameters. It's a 2.9 acre site, $3.7 million purchase price, zone multifamily, and although there are some infrastructure lifts that we'll get into in a moment, the developability of the site is really good. It's flat. There's not resource constraints or other components that could lead to risk. This is a great opportunity to execute now and really put our programming together. As you see on the map above you, it's located in the North Bethany area. As we know, that's a rapidly growing area for multifamily housing and home building, right at the intersection of Kaiser Road and then 3 local frontage streets surrounding it as well. So good overall site access for the site. One of the components that we've been working through in partnership with the Land Use and Transportation Department is really the long-range vision for the North Bethany area, and in particular this site. In front of you is a schematic that was put in the North Bethany Community Plan that really specifically looked at this site, and it's really a good fit for what the type of design that affordable housing is going to bring. Strong street presence with an urbanized landscape. The ability to really have kind of key gateway nodes at the intersections. We expect to really have the building front onto Kaiser Road and provide that pedestrian feel that you're starting to really see built out in the North Bethany area. So fronting on Kaiser and then looking at kind of parking, access location behind the building really bodes well with what the plan's looking for and what we anticipate for the development. We anticipate approximately 4-story multifamily building. One of the constraints and opportunities for the site is the ground floor does have to be a non-residential use. So that'll provide a great amenity for the area. It is a challenge in affordable housing to do non-residential. Operating a commercial is not really what a housing authority does. And this is a growing area, but still further away from the commercial nodes that you'll see along Sunset Highway. That being said, there's opportunities to be more creative, and we've confirmed that with the planning department in the zoning. That doesn't have to be a traditional retail. There can be a community service amenity or a daycare. And that's some of the feedback we've heard with our advisory committees as well, is to really be strategic with our partnerships and have a service provision component of the development. So that'll add a complexity to the project, but it's definitely will be an opportunity as well to have a non-residential amenity to the area as it continues to add rooftops. The internal feedback process, just to go through this context, really this idea was first laid out during the quarterly update to your board in early May the Housing Authority being a lead developer in the county and really taking ownership of projects. In late May, as we began to really pursue this particular site, we met with LUT to discuss some of the Land Use and Transportation Department, to discuss some of the zoning opportunities for the site and really present our plans at a high level. And it seemed like a good fit, and we got good feedback from them as far as some potential transportation opportunities. I will say, in general, the site can support 100 units. We might want to think about a master plan process potentially to really think about site layout and components. But in general, there's lots of support, and it seemed like a good fit. Then we presented to the Housing Advisory Committee in late May to get their feedback. We had really good insight as far as what they were looking for. That's really where the Housing Advisory Committee emphasized the need to think creatively about partnerships for the non-retail. We have some good expertise on that board, and they shared concerns about traditional retail development in affordable housing. So that kind of initial thought was really reemphasized as far as being non-traditional with that component. And then we met with our real estate advisory group, which consists of county leadership, to give feedback and thoughts before presenting to the board. They were also supportive and had some good feedback as far as how we think about public funding opportunities, as well as some of the infrastructure costs to really work to get an understanding of those as well, which we've done through some of our comp work and analysis of the site. We have a general idea of some of the infrastructure costs and challenges that will have to be accounted for the ultimate development. And then we're in front of you today to seek authorization to execute the purchase and sale agreement. Quickly, some advantages of the site. It's affordable housing located in a growing high opportunity area, which is really good for the need to provide that type of housing in an area that's had a lot of market rate housing, but affordable housing has certainly lagged. So being able to really provide a diverse housing type in North Bethany was what was anticipated and accounted for in the planning and execution efforts. It's located in what's called a difficult development area, which essentially means an area that has high costs of land, high costs of construction. And what that does is it allows, through the federal low-income housing tax credit program, an additional equity boost, 120% equity boost, 35% equity boost to leverage additional low-income housing tax credit funds. So that allows for, although it's expensive, land is expensive and development is expensive in North Bethany, a lot of that can be offset with our equity component as well. It's a growing high production area, lots of housing growth and development, and the zoning generally meets the development need of 100 units, although again, there are some complexities we'll have to work through with the non-residential. Some of the disadvantages of the site, there is limited access to walkable goods and services. Hopefully that will change as the North Bethany area grows out and develops. And this will be the first step to that with the non-residential. But it is a little bit of a challenge when you have an urban growth boundary expansion area to be kind of on that new frontier of housing typically goes first and retail follows. So there isn't quite the access that we'd see as far as goods and services. We'll need to be strategic about that in our partnerships and how we really work to be able to meet the resident needs. And then again, there's a substantial site frontage that will add to the infrastructure costs. That's just the reality is typically the market is very efficient for land. If a site's vacant, there's usually a reason why. Sometimes it's just the site isn't developable, but other times the typical market rate uses don't necessarily able to meet that. A market rate developer that has that rate of return to hit, that site frontage is really critical. It's critical too for affordable housing, but by purchasing the site and developing our programming, we can overcome some of those costs by just being really careful in our underwriting to make sure we can meet those infrastructure costs. And then again, the mixed use requirements is a disadvantage in that it's not the easiest thing to work with affordable housing, but certainly there's some opportunities. Some of the details is $3.7 million arm's length transaction. This property was listed on the market at a slightly higher rate, a higher number, so we were able to negotiate and have a general agreed upon framework for a $3.7 million arm's length transaction. We anticipate, or in the purchase and sale, we anticipate a 90-day due diligence and then 90 days to close. The due diligence items will be the standard items that would be required for a vacant land purchase, looking at a Phase 1 ESA. We're not aware of any concerning site history on the site or adjacent uses, but the Phase 1 ESA will confirm that and provide the legal protection to the authority needed. And then looking at survey and then appraisal as well to make sure that this is a true market-based arm's length transaction. And then considering as well potential soil analysis and evaluation. Again, no concerning history or slope or components with the soil quality, but that's where that technical analysis will confirm. The intent is a $111,000 earnest money deposit to go hard after the 90-day due diligence period, and an approximately 100-unit, 4 to 5 story development as we begin our programming. One of the components that we are sensitive to is that land price, the $3.7 million. This is, again, a market rate deal. That's a fair deal, but it's definitely a market rate deal. You have above you some different comps in the area, and it tends to align well, especially with some of the properties in the North Bethany area. The third item is a smaller property, but a $33 square foot listing currently. And then a couple others as well that are listed at higher amounts, which are reflected in the larger area, likely the efficiencies of scale with almost a 7-acre property. And then in comparison as well, El Monica, the site being developed for affordable housing, larger site, Central Beaverton site did have a slightly lower price. So there is a value add to North Bethany that really, as you see with all the rapid growth and development and high opportunity area, it's going to be a little bit higher than other areas in the county. And then just as a comparison for a true kind of urban, commercially zoned piece of property, a private developer purchased and has built apartment in the Tiger Triangle at $41 a square foot. One of the things to emphasize is this is really an intent by the authority to be strategic with some of the changes we see in the landscape with affordable housing. Land is valuable. It's highly valuable in Washington County, and really the intent is for us to be proactive as an agency and purchase a piece of property before we see increase in land values or increase in competition with other both market and affordable housing developers. So this is really a land banking strategy. It is a risk, but it's a calculated risk to have a catalyst project. So we'll be looking for different paths for public funding. It's important to emphasize that there isn't just one path, but there are a couple that are most viable. The path one would to be consider a Metro bond a renewal of the Metro bond program. This would really allow for the housing authority to be both the bond issuer and the developer, and that's important as we have a lot more affordable housing in the region. We've essentially hit our maximum volume cap for affordable housing, and there's a long queue for projects to have to wait in line. The authority has the ability to issue our own bonds if the project is a housing authority-led project that doesn't have associated state funds. So that would be the most efficient path and most expeditious to development is to have additional Metro bonds or other regional bonds be the lead development component. The second path it would take longer because it would be subject to the state volume cap and the coordination, but it's certainly a viable path. We saw in the legislative package that was just passed substantial funding for affordable housing. It's anticipated that a lot of those funds would be in the state LIFT program as gap funding. So that would certainly be a viable path as well. It would just take longer to wait essentially for a state bonding issuance. And the Housing Authority would look to also pair federal funds as well, especially with either paths, but especially Path 2 as we align for that approximately $20 million public funding that we would see. And then the third is to really consider pursuing a competitive 9% low-income housing tax credit. Those funds are competitive, but we're certainly willing and viable as an agency and are definitely looking at the upcoming 9% funding package. I will say that this site doesn't necessarily meet some of the competitive parameters. It's a little bit larger in unit count. A 9%, you'll typically see 75 to 80 units that are most competitive just with some of the efficiencies. And there is a lot of infrastructure. So a 9% could be a challenge, but certainly something to consider, especially if the first two paths become difficult. And then again, the infrastructure costs will be a big lift, but definitely a needed benefit to the area. Based on some of our underwriting, we expect $600 a square foot, and which would be over $1 million in frontage, and then the transportation development tax and SDCs would be about $2 million. One of the positive conversations we've had with LUT is there is the ability to potentially use some of that transportation development tax payments to go towards the infrastructure improvements along Kaiser. So some of that might be duplicative and folded in, but definitely a lift. And that ends my presentation. I'll take questions or any direction the board has.
Commissioners, do you have any questions on this opportunity? Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you for the very thorough presentation. One question, you talked about the walkability access. What about public transportation? I think I see Springville Road. I know where this is down there, but
There's bus service in the area. It doesn't directly serve the site now. I believe the closest stop is between 0.4 and 0.6 miles. One of the things, though, that you'll see and we've experienced when we have a lot of multifamily development is both the transportation planning team and TriMet tend to be proactive about thinking about how to serve those sites. So we've had those conversations initially with LUT, and I think we'll continue. It might make sense to look at either rerouting, potentially transit lines, and there is the ability to provide shuttle service as well. So it's definitely something that we'll need to be proactive about to see how we can make sure transit serves that site a little bit better than it does.
thank you. And in District 2, we've had a lot of discussions about the TriMet remapping and doing those types of things. So I would highly encourage early and frequent conversations.
Thank you, Director.
On that note, yeah, that route is very limited access, and it stops early. I remember having to use it quite frequently to go work in the Bethany Plaza area. So, I mean, of course, you got PCC that has another route, but it's very, I mean, I think 7 o'clock is the last route, and on weekends, none on Sunday. So.
Any other questions, directors?
Got maybe more of a comment or a little advisement on, and I'm sure the Housing Advisory Committee is also kind of well in the weeds here, so this may be redundant on some of the advice, but I think one thing that we're seeing a lot at the state level is just more thinking around how to integrate childcare into affordable housing opportunities. And so you know, the opportunity potential barrier, obviously, with the retail space down below, I think could bring in some interesting ingenuity in terms of like what folks need access to in terms of the infrastructure up there. Funny enough, my brother-in-law just moved to this area, moved out of affordable housing into market rate housing in the North Bethany area, and we saw the exact same things that you're saying. You know, really. Lots of new housing, lots of new opportunities, but I think there's a huge need for additional infrastructure like we're talking about, you know, and so just wanted to nod towards some of the developments at the state level around additional childcare and affordable housing co-location strategies that could be of interest for us down the road if this materializes. So yeah, really appreciate the thoughtfulness and trying to think about what folks need and how to utilize this as a good opportunity. So really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Director. And we have had those conversations with the planning department and have confirmed that childcare is allowed, so that could be a great opportunity. And our legal counsel quickly reminded me as well that it is an allowed use, so definitely would be a great opportunity. Director
Rogers?
Thank you. By the way, Mike, I can hardly recognize you. You're changing, you're getting a little facial hair there, if I'm seeing it correct. Yeah.
Hey, it's summertime. Let's go.
Well, yeah. For some of us, we've had it a long time, so it's, I understand. My question, not on this side, but on this side, to our acting director, because I know you've got a lot of experience with housing throughout the region. And I'm not clear in my mind. I just one. I mean, we've got everybody else, I think, who probably is looking at this and saying it's a good purchase. But I'm looking in terms of it's a developing area. We don't have transit. You can't say the TriMet's going to come out there any time soon. I mean, it's somewhat of a desert out there. Most of District 2 is a desert for transit, in my opinion. We need more. It's very costly. Your land banking, your only cited cost, additional cost, was infrastructure. Whenever you are constructing, you're going to have a lot of other costs. We're not looking at those at this point. So tell me a little bit about the strategy in your mind as coming in. It's much cheaper to buy existing units, and we're not paying $450,000, $500,000 a unit. We're less than that. We're renovating. Immediate needs, we're trying to put them in areas where there's immediate needs. We're trying to put them where people have services. What's appealing about this other than it's someplace out in the future?
Thank you for that's an invigorating question, Director. And it's a great question. I think ideally, an acquisition strategy around existing properties is great to tuck into your overall strategy. I think what we have tended to experience is that often what superficially looks like a better deal involves a level of rehab and relocation costs associated with it, that it becomes a much more complicated sort of calculus. So I wouldn't say that it's a binary choice. I think, thinking about acquisition of existing properties is good to tuck into your strategy. I think, this is certainly a shift for you as an organization in terms of, as Andrew articulated, sort of assertively pursuing land banking opportunities in ways that you haven't necessarily in the past. And there is some risk associated with doing that. I think, there is an opportunity here to, I think particularly with exploring this, how do you use this commercial space, and is there an opportunity for it to be a catalyst around childcare, and what does that help draw into the neighborhood where it looks like a good opportunity to sort of leverage the other sort of public works that you have available to, bring to bear on this. I think wherever any opportunity that comes before you is going to have some degree of complication or risk associated with it. And I think there's some building of muscle around, deciding what your risk threshold is as a board and whether you're comfortable moving forward with it. I think, there are a lot of appealing qualities to this as a land banking opportunity, and some, uncertain but viable paths for putting the financing together for it.
I'll respond back real quickly, and then I'll let it go. Please. We've got, obviously, probably enough votes to do this today, and I'm not going to vote against the majority, but the critical analysis in my mind is putting people in housing today, not someplace in the future. And to go out into a site where you're going to place a 5-story building, it's not in the character of the neighborhood. There's nothing like that around there. And you're going to hopefully have funds in the future to do this, versus having people without housing today is problematic to me. It really is. And so I'll say that for the record and move on.
Understood. And I will offer, I think this, it may be useful to think of this on the continuum of what you're grappling with, because the purchase and operation of shelters is sort of that immediate solution, but you also recognize that like long-term, that's not the long-term strategy, and this sits sort of farther out. And I do think you are, in a position where thinking about what does 10 to 15 years out from now look like is an important part of grappling with it, as much as how do we get folks off of the street and out of tents today. So I have great respect for the sort of the spectrum that you have to balance in terms of immediate term and longer term questions to grapple with.
Other director questions or comments?
I don't have any questions. Great presentations, and I look forward to supporting this.
So I'll finish up. I would like to say that I took the opportunity for a site visit recently, and I would say what you're proposing in terms of a 4 or 5-story building on this road is well within the character of the other development that has already taken place. As to concerns with regard to existing transit service, I would like to offer up the following thinking. We've moved forward in investing in and opening the valve-free at Avenida 26, not anywhere near a transit line. Planbeck Gardens in Tualatin, similarly. Terrence Glen is coming up, and while it's on an arterial, it's not known for great transit service either. Nor is the Tigard Senior Housing, nor is the other Tigard Triangle Affordable Housing unit that you mentioned previously as developed by the private market. So while I think we do support a mixture of travel types, we are not requiring that residents of any affordable housing be absolutely transit dependent. So I am not concerned about that with regard to the proposal that you're making before us. I would like to inquire about something that is listed on the topic sheet for this item, but I'm not familiar with, though I don't wish to belabor the point with regard to moving on here. And it is, as you've noted, this location is desirable because it is in a federally designated difficult development area. And I'm not familiar with what that designation, what's behind that designation? What are some of the things that characterize an area to give it that DDA status?
Thank you, Chair Harrington. It's typically areas that are high income, high amenity, that have expensive land value, high construction costs. And there's really kind of two designations that go into areas that are eligible for the basis boost. The first is the areas that are census tracts experiencing poverty and have the need for affordable housing. And then the second are the difficult development areas. And traditionally, those areas don't have as much affordable housing. It's difficult to develop affordable housing. So it's really an intent through our tax policy to incentivize development in those two areas through the eligible equity boosts.
Thank you. So we've had the benefit of a presentation on this and the opportunity for questions and comments. At this juncture, I would like to ask if there is a motion to authorize the interim executive director to negotiate and execute a purchase and sale agreement to begin due diligence for property at 15751 Northwest Brugger Road.
Motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye. Thank you, directors. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 7-0. And we'll leave you right here and ask you to please speak to us on the second action item for today with regard to Woodspring Apartments.
Thank you, Director, or Chair Harrington and Board of Directors. Again, my name is Andrew Crampton, Development Manager, and I'm here to give an update on the Woodspring apartment acquisition and to seek your authority to authorize the existence of revenue bonds and the acquisition of Woodspring. And I will be less verbose with this presentation. Just for context, as folks know, Woodspring Apartment is a 172-unit property in Tigard that had a 30-year affordability, emphasizing that the intent with this acquisition is to both preserve affordability at the building and also preserve housing stability for all residents, including market residents that have moved in. Some of the deal logistics, since the board authorized waiving contingencies in April and having the authority move towards the purchase, the project will have an issued revenue bond in the amount to not to exceed $20.5 million, and those proceeds will finance a portion of the acquisition. I was remiss in the beginning of the presentation. We also have available online as panelists, bond counsel from Foster Garvey that has been assisting the authority with the bond financing in the acquisition, and their help has been tremendous, and they're available if there's any technical questions on the bond components, as well as our development consultant from Bronner and Company that has assisted greatly with the acquisition and moving our project forward with our three financing sources. So I'll do my best to answer questions, but if there's any technical questions or authority review that require bond or development counsel, they're also online as well. So as in addition to the up to $20.5 million tax-exempt revenue bond that'll be issued by the authority and provided by Banner Bank. Oregon Housing Community Service has really stepped up through their push preservation funding and committed $25 million in a loan to pursue acquisition for the property. And then the authority will contribute up to $4 million from local fund. 1.5 million of that will be held for immediate capital needs that were identified during our review of the building to make sure that the building continues to be high quality and really prepares for the long-term syndication of the property. These revenue bonds were structured in a way that will allow within 3 to 5 years to have a 4% syndication for substantial upgrades to the building to really continue the useful life. So in particular, the Oregon Housing Community Service grant funding would be absorbed into that tax credit partnership. We've had conversations with the state about that, and they're aware of that incoming planned syndication. In addition, the revenue bond is structured in that the first 2 years of the bond will be interest-only payments and no prepayment penalty. So these funds are structured for that long-term work that we expect and funding leverage. So again, the issuance of the revenue bond will have a fixed rate of 5.37, which in today's climate is really competitive because of the ability to have a tax exempt where the interest payments are not subject to federal tax payment. And the scale of the project as well allows for that favorable interest rate. After the first 2 years, the principal and interest on the bond shall be payable in monthly installments, but again, no prepayment penalty, so that'll be folded into the syndication in 3 to 5 years. Some of the approval items that have been prepared through both bond counsel and legal counsel and county counsel review is the execution and delivery of the bond, and then associated deeds that you'll see in any standard real estate transaction, trust deed, documents, certificates, and then the post-issuance compliance policy and procedures to make sure that the tax-exempt nature of the bond is preserved and there isn't any private purpose funding that would put the eligibility of tax-exempt in jeopardy. So that's where our legal counsel is available and has been guiding the authority on the standards and parameters of the tax-exempt bond to make sure that we continue to be compliant post-issuance. And then the second action resolution is just to approve the acquisition and really authorize the officers of the authority to execute and record project documents and approve the borrowing by the OHCS loan to not to exceed the $25 million. And then similar to the tax-exempt bond, to have the associated closing documents that have been prepared and are ready for execution, including a promissory note to OHCS and loan agreement, as well as securitization and trust deeds. One of the components with the regulatory agreement that's critical and really is important in our preservation efforts is a 60-year affordability covenant that will be associated with the property. It's our mission and our intent, of course, as an authority to pursue preservation of affordability, but this is in addition to intent, this regulatory agreement will be legally binding for that affordability. Next steps for the acquisition is, assuming approval by the board, is to then execute and record closing documents. In addition, we intend to amend and assign the property management agreement with the existing property management company. This will be approximately a 1-year duration to have stability at the building, and then the authority will long-term seek a procurement RFP, an evaluation for permanent property management. But due to the timeline, the existing infrastructure in place, the amendment and the assignment is the only realistic path to continue in the short term. The intent then is to complete the acquisition, and then the authority intends to meet in person with building residents to discuss the transition and really prepare for voucher eligibility. Our voucher eligibility requires exhausting all existing residents to see if they're available to apply for project-based vouchers before we open up vacant units and units at turnover to pull from our existing voucher wait list. As was discussed and has been underwritten during our due diligence prior to waiving contingencies, is vacant units and units at turnover are intended to be filled with project-based vouchers, and we've planned for that accordingly for up to 33 project-based vouchers for the property. And then you will then prepare the scope for needed capital work that'll be funded both through the Housing Authority reserve that we're holding, but also operations cash flow from the leased units to work on things like carport replacement, siding repair, gutter components, just immediate identified work at the property. And with that, I will close and ask if there's any questions or concerns prior to seeking authorization approval and approval of issuance of bonding.
Well, it's been a long 2.5 years since the period of affordability ended on Woodsprings, and this apartment complex is in the heart of Commissioner Rogers' district, and I know he has had a long 2.5 years of entertaining phone calls, meetings with area state legislators, the Tigard mayors, Tigard city councilors, staff, neighbors. Would you like to start with any questions or comments?
My only comment is let's get it approved, both of them.
Other directors, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I am thrilled that we're at this point. I will be following up with you because there is a term of art that I think I need to become more familiar with, and that is push preservation funding. So I'll follow up with you on that. So at this juncture, we have 2 different resolutions to move forward with this item, and I want to make sure we have separate motions and votes on each of them, so there's no question that we've authorized both. So I will read the titles of each. The first, in the matter of authorizing the issuance of a revenue bond of the authority in principal amount not to exceed $20,500,000 to finance a portion of the cost of acquiring the Woodspring apartments, authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, a trust deed and other agreements, documents, and certificates, authorizing the sale and delivery of the bond to Banner Bank, adopting post-issuance compliance policies and procedures, and determining related matters. Do we have a motion on said resolution? Enthusiastically from Director Rogers. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Director Roper. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hands or arms. Thank you, directors. Any opposed? That resolution passes on a vote of 7-0, passes unanimously. And now the second one. In the matter of authorizing the acquisitions of Woodspring Apartments, authorizing the acceptance of a loan from the state of Oregon, acting by and through its Housing and Community Services Department to finance a portion of the costs of such acquisition, authorizing property transfer documents, loan documents, and other agreements, documents, and certificates, and determining related matters. Do we have such a motion? We have a motion from Director Rogers, a second from Director Roper. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hands or arms or saying aye. Thank you, directors. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 7-0. Congratulations to all of you. It's been a long 2.5 years, and we are grateful for your practicing the art of the possible at every step of the way. Thank you. And we're also grateful to the state of Oregon for making the funds available for the acquisition of Woodspring Apartments. What a terrific day. Thank you. And next, that brings us to the second public comment period of today's Housing Authority Board of Directors meeting. Clerk Moss.
Thank you, Director Harrington. I did not see anyone come into the room and sign up. Did I miss anyone? Is anyone stepping forward? So we do have one hand online. Cheyenne. Cheyenne, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Board of Directors, for letting me address this meeting. Yes, I remember talking to Joss Kreitz back 2.5 years ago. And as a resident, I'll try not to tear up, but as a resident who's a senior that wanted to preserve living in place here in Tigard in our community, which is so important to us, that I'm so grateful for all the efforts that the tenants have put into it, that all the constituents in our community, for your board and for everyone involved in getting this funding. I so appreciate it. And so I'd like to speak on behalf of the residents here who fought so hard to stay in place. Thank you for providing housing for this much needed demographic. And for me personally, thank you.
All right, thank you, Cheyenne. Would anyone else like to provide comments to the Housing Authority for up to 5 minutes? Give you just a moment to utilize raise hand functions. Not seeing any additional hands. Director Harrington.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. And next we have Board of Director announcements. Are there any announcements, fellow board members? None for today? All right. Well, with that, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn today's Housing Authority Board of Directors meeting. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn today's meeting. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye. Thank you, directors. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 7-0. Our meeting is now concluded. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.